Good afternoon, everybody. Uh, it's a real pleasure to follow the previous session because I really resonate a lot with Eamon's problems on video conferencing. We're in a slightly different, we don't do video conferencing at I2I Telesolutions. Our focus is on moving medical data and medical images through the internet. We are like the Federal Express of medical imaging, if you like, with some important differences. We, of course, like Federal Express, we care about the speed at which we move the data. But we have to guarantee the quality of what's inside the box, if you like. So fidelity of the medical data, whether it's a full an MRI study or a video loop for ultrasound scan, is very, very important to us to reproduce that very faithfully at the other end. The other way I guess we are different is that we care about the information coming back also, because the way we monetize our model is we carry these packets of medical transactions from a patient who is geographically separated from the doctor, and then medical advice has to come back, and that whole process of monetization is our business. And as a result of that, we get to look into a lot of the kitchen units of a lot of startup companies, major OEMs, in terms of how they're producing the data. It could be a GE that's producing the next, the V-scan machine, which is like a monitoring echo for the heart, or it could be a very, a startup company, that's coming up with some new wireless technology. So what I'm going to share, I'm going to change the tempo a little bit from the previous speakers. I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to pontificate a little bit about, what's going to happen with wireless technology. When we go wireless, what are the significant pluses and minuses that might happen? These are some of the things that I feel we need to watch out for. I see these as opportunities. The first thing that happens, I think doctors migrate from a connected world to actually a collaborative world. And if you really look at it today, telemedicine, one of the speakers talked about, making a phone call to Tata to get a doctor. That wasn't a phone. So, but in terms of actually collaborating, it's interesting. Some of our customer, doctors, are in Facebook. Elsevier, in fact, yesterday there was a presentation from Elsevier. You may have met Rohit Kumar, the CEO. He was telling me how his most popular medical information database is now available through the Facebook. So the socialization of medicine, real collaboration, I think begins to happen when you get to wireless technology. Because, wirelessly you can do so many things. You can connect to so many people. I think patients also become customers as opposed to consumers. And what I mean by that, today, you get what you get, especially in India. If you really go to the nearest hospital, gentleman before told us, a 6-hour experience in a government hospital. That sounded pretty nice compared to some of the ones I have had. But, you get what you get. You cannot choose. But what happens with, the internet, you can find out about the doctors before you can visit them. You can choose. You can actually do comparison shopping. And we see this happening more and more in the area of radiology and ophthalmology, where people are actually shopping around to get the best reports from the most aggressive doctors in terms of pricing. If I want to get a radiology report, who do I go to? That all becomes possible through wireless technology. People have already talked about the secure ownership of health records, but this is interesting. Very recently, my mom had a pacemaker replaced, and after a surgery. Thank God she came out, well, but I ended up with several kilograms of medical data, and I felt good about it because I paid for the damn thing. So, but it's absolutely useless to me. Yes, I can take it to another doctor, but how many people in India or in the developing nations have access to doctor? In sub-Saharan Africa, the patient-to-doctor ratio is 50,000 patients to one doctor. In India, it's more like 3,000 patients per doctor. So, the whole idea of having medical records where, I own it and manage it like my bank account, suddenly becomes possible because, when the information is wireless, it's in a computer. If it's in a bag, it is not. You have no control over it. You think you do. It's just physical control. I think the other very interesting thing that we are noticing is at the base of the pyramid, you begin to see true democratization of healthcare. By that I mean that it's amazing that the first encounters that an infant in the remotest villages of India, the first encounter that he may have with a physician, maybe through a cell phone. You need the most aggressive technologies, the latest technologies, in the most far-reaching outreach programs to bring healthcare to the masses. So one of the things that I take a lot of pride in, and working with the companies in India, is it's if you can make it work in India, you can make it work anywhere. You talk about electronic medical records. One of the NGOs we work with, they were telling me something very interesting. They're saying one of the patients who came in, and they were trying to get electronic medical record system going for these patients, and the patients, they asked him what his address was. His address, he said, was next to the drain. Okay, now you try and get an EMR system around it. But next to the drain was absolutely crystal clear to the people in that village, because there was one drain that came to that village, and this patient happened to be living right next to that drain. So we need to be very realistic. But I think, to complete that story, that NGO, they were actually working on some kind of an GPS-enabled RFID tagging system. So I was thinking, gee, this is crazy. You're trying to do the most advanced technologies just to track down a patient's whereabouts in a wireless connected world. So I think these are some of the opportunities. I think if we can work towards bringing some of these things happen, making these happen, I think the sky's the limit. So I'm going to share with you just a couple more slides. I don't have a whole bunch of slides of some of the things we find ourselves, some of the projects we find ourselves doing with our customers, and some very interesting things, and the way we experience them. And this may not be the state of the future as it will unfold, but this is the way that we are experiencing it today. So some of the scenarios that we get into. This diagram here on the right-hand side shows the patients. And the previous speakers spoke at length about all the medical equipments that are getting wirelessly connected either through the DSL system or through the mobile network. And this is a very interesting space for us. We work with a lot of startup companies and OEMs who are producing this data, and we are able to grab this data in a very secure way, move it through the internet. It goes into a server. Once it's in the server, you can have a very secure, the information is available for a doctor to look at, and suddenly a lot of people can now consult, give second opinions, share the data. Now, the interesting thing is that, with this system, a lot of people are worried about real-time telemedicine. We can do real-time telemedicine in some cases, but it's actually logistically not a very practical thing to do, because it's very unlikely that a patient and the appropriate subspecialist doctor will be available at the same time. It's a horrendous logistical problem to match the two. So I believe actually for a long time it's going to be a store and forward, or at least almost pseudo real time as the situation dictates. The one place where it becomes very real time is when you're in an ambulance situation or a life-threatening situation. There, I think some of the technologies like Eamon talked about, very, very critical. Very interesting area. There's a dangling line there. It's meant to be there like that because there's a very interesting phenomena that we're encountering where the medical data is not actually coming through a device like this, but it's actually coming straight from the patient. It's actually coming from inside the body or something stuck on top of the body. And this is not science fiction. We are actually working on a project that involves this. And I used to be in my previous life in Texas Instruments, so I'm very proudly showing you. In Texas Instruments, we used to make silicon chips that used to go there. So these are chips that go on a patch, and they will transmit information wirelessly. And our job is to grab that information and make it useful and have it managed by a doctor at the other end. So the vision, and again, this is not my personal vision. This is a vision that's driven by what our customers are asking for. What they would really like to be able to see is that if you have a patient and there is maybe an ECG or some life-threatening thing happening to the patient, what you really want to be able to do is to go and poll a doctor wirelessly somewhere. And this doctor says, well, I'm sorry, it's time out, is on vacation or whatever. Immediately the system takes over. He goes to Dr. B. Dr. B is busy, denied. And hopefully you go to Dr. C, and the Dr. C is available. Okay. What then we begin doing with our system is that's when the medical transaction starts happening. We start, if it's an MRI or an ECG or whatever it might be, we start streaming that. And it could be to a wireless device here, like we're showing the playbook, for instance. Another very interesting thing starts happening is that we can now, because the data is wireless, we can involve Dr. D there. And they can collaborate. And that collaboration can actually happen real time. So again, this is what we are experiencing as a requirement from our customer base, and we are actively working in some of these solutions. So real-time collaboration, just to go back to my first chart, just to recap, we are now talking about real collaborative medicine, I think being a reality. Customers, as I said, being able to shop around, again, becoming a reality, and so on and so forth. I think data security, medical records in the environment that I talked about next to the drain, it may not be an immediate need, but if you really look at what's happening around in India with the UID scheme and everything else that the government is driving, medical data is vital not just for records but for research. It's amazing. We are involved with some work with which is aimed at reducing birth defects in children. So we have to catch birth defects before they actually happen in the womb, and just keeping a record of it in a state. It's vital. So keeping that record for a long time, not just for medical, patient purposes, but also for research is vital. And hopefully, world's largest democracy, we can maybe democratize healthcare as well. Thank you. That's all I have. Oh, thank you.
Yes, yes. Statistics about number of patients versus GPs that you're publishing, is it really true? In India, I think the number of doctors which are now reporting Ayush setup or allopathic setup, I heard that it is as good as UK. But only problem is a lot of them live in the urban areas compared to.
That's one of the problems. That's one of the problems. No, there is actually. Let me tell you what happens is if you take all the homeopathic doctors and other, somebody you can talk to, so you get to a number in India. I've done quite a number of analysis on this. Number gets to more like 1,700, 1,800 to one per person. But when you actually contract a disease or when you have something wrong with you, you don't just want to see a GP. You want to see a subspecialist. You want to see a specialist, and there the ratio goes haywire. Okay, so if you want to get to an ophthalmologist, it's 100,000 to 1 is the ratio.
Yeah, but our performance of delivering care is also equally high. Number of heart surgeons,
right.
Number of surgeries that we do versus Western thing is also quite high.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So are we having better care already in that kind of a...
I think it's an international global ratio issue. I mean, even in the best nation.
It takes to consult a general physician in my neighborhood is maybe 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes, versus the appointment that I would take in a US hospital would be like much higher.
See, our estimates are about 60% of the population of the world, which would be about 4 billion people, get to see a doctor maybe once a month when the van comes around the neighborhood, and follow-up is in the lap of the gods. So you're probably referring to the other, 40%.
We have to stop.